Thank you. Hi, my name is Kasey. I'm an alcoholic. Randy, thank you for asking me to speak tonight. Amy, thank you for your beautiful introduction. And, nothing makes me feel safer than being in a room filled with alcoholics. It's a pretty big meeting. I'm going to take a moment of silence to ask God to speak through me tonight, to calm my nerves a little bit. And I also want to take a moment of silence for the alcoholic who still suffers in and out of these rooms. All right. My sobriety date is 10/10/2019. And it's only by the grace of God, that I found my way into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. But when I got here, I didn't know that that's what that was, I thought it was the last house on the block, and I was coming here so I could start to try to get, the drink was the problem. The drink was always the problem, and it was never me. And when I came here, I learned that the drink was my solution for a really long time, and I was the problem. And if you can relate to that, I guess that you're in the right place. And I'm going to tell you what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now, in a general way. And so I'll start, I'm going to start with something lighthearted about my mom because in the beginning of my life, I always thought that the way that I was raised and the way that I just suffer from this disease, that I don't have enough. I never had enough attention. I never had enough love. I never had enough anything. And I know today that, our parents, our people in our lives do the best they can with what they have. But I didn't know that, it took getting sober and working my steps and, all of these beautiful things for me to realize that. So every day, especially in the beginning of my sobriety, every day I would go to a meeting, sometimes two, that's what I needed. And I still need those meetings, and every day I'd be like, okay, I'm going to go to this meeting, and this meeting, and my parents started to catch on, my mom and my stepdad. And they'd be like, oh, so you're going to go to this meeting at this time, so you're headed to happy hour? All these things at 5:30, okay, you secretary that meeting, so they started to catch on. I had such a routine, routine. I have a home group, I have a sponsor, I have a sobriety date, and I'm going to say the cigar meeting at the Alano Club, or Alano Bakersfield at the Alano Club, that's my home group. I have a sponsor. I've worked the 12 steps, but every time I would go to a meeting, I'd be like, okay, I love you, bye, and my mom would always joke. She'd be like, okay, blame it on your dad. And I'm like, and then in the beginning, I was like thinking like, it was both of you, like you guys were the problem. And like now I know that like I have nothing to blame my mom for today. Like my mom is the most single-handed loving support system that I have today, other than the people in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and finally for the first time I had never told her that was like something that was so funny to me that she would say that. And she said, okay, well, you're going to Ventura, so you can blame it on me, I guess, because, I don't live there. And, and I come from an alcoholic mom and I come from an alcoholic dad, and I don't believe that that's what makes me an alcoholic. I believe what makes me an alcoholic is the fact that when I put substance into my body, I can no longer react like a normal human being. This phenomenon of craving happens and it takes over everything that I know to be good and true in my life, and I can no longer differentiate the true from the false. So I told her yesterday, I was like, you know what, Mom? I was like, I have nothing to blame you for today. I was like, I love you more than words. And if you know me and you know what it was like when I had come into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was angry. I was so angry. I was just a girl. I was 26 when I started trying to get sober, and I was 27 when I finally got somewhere. I found exactly where I was meant to be. And those people in Alcoholics Anonymous showed me how to live one day at a time. So I'm going to go about what it was like. Like I said, I come from an alcoholic mom and an alcoholic dad, and my dad died from this disease. My dad died from this disease, and my mom's still struggling, but she's okay, you know. Um, and when I was young, like when I started to realize that I suffered from this not enough-ness, my mom would always be at work, and I'd always be with the babysitter, and someone else was always taking care of me, or I would find myself alone at a really young age, fending for myself, taking care of myself, or relying on other people that I didn't really know to make sure that she could give me what I needed, like she could provide money and a safe environment for me to stay. But like the mother's love and attention and time wasn't there. And my parents got divorced right after I was born. And so I was going back and forth a lot, and my mom, bless her heart, she did the best she could with what she had, and she had to rely on other people. And we would stay here, we'd stay with a friend, and then she'd get in a new relationship and we'd move in with them, and and it happened back and forth, and so the pattern started off at a really young age where I thought that it was okay that I could kind of frivolously do whatever I wanted, wherever I wanted, with whoever I wanted. And at a young age, it just wasn't really a safe environment anymore. And I was angry, because I would go to school and the kids would have, and she was a single mom, and my dad wasn't really present. He was drunk, and my mom was working, and then she would go and, live her life after work. And, I always desired what these other people had, these moms that were like at the bake sales and doing all the things, like with their minivans and at the soccer games. And, I would always, identify that in people, like, well, you have this and I don't, and that not enoughness turned into resentment and fear. Like, what are these people going to think about me if they know that I live in a trailer, and it started off really young. Like I was having body image issues, and I didn't have a God in my life, and we never talked about any sort of spiritual being other than, we work and we do this for our lives, and we're the ones that pick ourselves up and, do all these things. It was always me centered, and I caught that from both of my parents. My dad worked in the oil fields, and my mom was a waitress, and when after she wasn't a waitress anymore, she worked in like selling brake parts, and she was running with the guys and doing what the guys did just to get an income. And looking back at it now, I know that I had two parents that loved me very much, and I know that, like there's no way that my mom would work as hard as she did if she didn't love me, to make sure that I had what I needed. And my dad, I mean, bless his heart, he just didn't ever want to be a dad. He was 10 years older than my mom, and my mom was 30 when she had me. He was 40. He thought that time in his life was over, and he didn't know how, and so for me, looking back on it, like now I know that I run from things when I don't know how to deal with them. And my dad eventually ended up getting remarried, and my mom got remarried, and neither of those relationships worked. But my dad upplanted and uprooted his whole entire life for this woman and left me behind. And so then that was another thing that made me feel like I wasn't enough. And and it was painful. My dad took the side of a woman And things happened in that family. I suffered from, um, I guess, sexual abuse, in that household, and from people that he trusted and loved, and uprooted our whole lives for, and that's something that I don't usually share a lot, but that is a big part of my story. Um, and I hated him. I hated him. He ended up staying over there till his dying day. He uprooted. He went to Reno, Nevada, and I didn't really talk to him. And that was when I was like I was like 10 years old. Like the last real conversation or the last real time I seen him as a child. That was the last time I'd ever seen him. And my mom had finally gotten remarried again for the third time, and she's still with this man today, and he's the whole light of our lives. My stepdad's amazing, and I couldn't think of two better people to be together. He really stepped up for a woman and a child, and he didn't have to. And I'm very thankful for the both of them today. But it wasn't like that for a long time. I hated him because he was a biker and he had long hair, and he took my mom's time. So when my mom wasn't working, she was out partying with him. And I was raising myself at home, and I would have friends, and I would go to their houses, and they had parents that like cooked dinner and like didn't just leave them money under the thing and say, get a pizza or this or that, I'll be home later. Well, later turned into 3 a.m. and I would always act like it didn't bother me, but I would go to my friend's house, and it just was like the Brady Bunch family for a lot of the families that I looked up to growing up. Like, they all went to church, they all did things together, they all sat down at the table, and I didn't even know what that looked like. You guys sit down at a table to eat? Like, that's weird. And and that's just how it worked out, and I replanted a lot. Like, my mom uprooted me a lot, and so every time I would get uprooted again, I was the new girl, and I had to make new friends, and I was weird because, I hung out with the black sheeps, the people with disabilities, and the outcasts, the outsiders, because on the inside it was safer being close to people that I knew got it, because I felt that way. I felt outside of, I felt not enough. I felt like that, like had finally fit in, And when I got to high school, it was, the pot smokers and the people that would like ditch class, and I had arrived. I had found my people, and so I did a lot of transplanting, and I get to high school. I get to 8th grade, and I go to visit my aunt, and I was, I don't know, how old are you in 8th grade? I don't know. I was young, like 11, I think. I go to visit my aunt, and no, time is off. Anyways, I'm older now, and I go to visit my aunt, and I hadn't talked to my dad in all those years. I was 10 the last time I had talked to my dad, and I was probably like in high school at this point, and I had gotten in contact with my dad, and he would send me letters, and my mom would withhold those letters out of fear, that I would eventually choose to like be in my dad's life. And fear is just such a funny thing. It really is the root of all evil. And it's only until I get here that I know that. I didn't know what that looked like before I got here. So, I get in contact with my dad, and I find out that he's no longer with the wife. And, the year after they moved, they separated. And pride and ego kept him out of my life because he basically was out there all by himself at this point. And my stepdad, in this same exact time in my life, had had a heart attack, and we almost lost him, and so he quit drinking. So my mom and dad running out and partying together was no longer a thing. My dad was sober, white-knuckling it. He's never been in the program He's never had a program. He was just one of those, that they talk about in the big book, that if something catastrophic happens, the doctor tells you that you have to take this medication and you can quit drinking. Like, he was one of those that could take it or leave it. And I'm not that alcoholic. So there's also a language barrier between him and I, because he's like, well, why can't you just stop? And I'm like, I don't know. I really don't. I ask myself that quite often. And so there was all these really big things happening in my life at this point. And I'm probably 17, and I get into my first serious relationship, and it was really bad. The good thing was my dad got sober and my mom quit running around, like running amok, and she'd only start drinking at home. But I ended up getting in contact with my dad, and we lost him. He said, "Kid, I promise, I'm so proud of you. Your parents did a great job with you." He was no longer my dad. He was just the person that was sperm, that made me, I guess. And he knew that. But he told me how proud he was of me, because I was looking at going to school, and he was like, your parents really did a good job with you. I'm really proud. And, I got to exchange some words with him, and he was like, "Kid, I promise you that we're going to go and do these things. I promise. Like, we're going to do it. Like, we're going to go here and we're going to go here." And, he never got to fulfill that promise. One day I just quit hearing from him. No more messages, no more letters, no more phone calls. And I get a package delivered to my doorstep, and it was my dad's ashes. And it was a couple of his most prized possessions. It was some pictures of me growing up as a kid that I had no idea that he had. And that really set the tone for like me leaving high school, and going to college. I couldn't even stay sober. Like, my first drink was at 11 years old, and I had the phenomenon of craving already, but I was too young to actually be able to do anything with that, So I took it when I could. And I used every other thing in my life to escape from anything that I was feeling, whether that was food, sex, music, TV, movies, books, whatever it is, I'm using it to escape reality. And that started off almost instantly, as the minute I learned to turn on a TV or like eat a snack, something like was always taking me outside of reality and outside of myself, from a really young age, and that just followed and followed and followed. And by the time I get old enough, like where I can have a job and I can learn to drive, and I have these friends that are way older than me, because I hung out with the outcast crowd, and they all had cars, and I was off and running. I moved out at 18 because my mom wanted to have control over my life after never having control over my life. She would never tell me that I couldn't do this or I couldn't do that, but all of a sudden I'm 16 and she wants to be like super mom, and like have some adult supervision in my life, but I'd already been taking care of myself. And that wasn't okay with me, because at that point I was like gone already. Like, I was already gone. I should have already been in my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And my dad, getting that package in the mail really set it off for me. I remember going to Bakersfield College, and at this point I wasn't quite driving yet, so I'm going to go back a little bit. But I would ride the get bus to and from my house to school. And sometimes when I'd get home later that night, I had no idea that I had just done a presentation in my communications course, and I had no idea how I got home. And that escalated. Like, everything started to look like that. My whole life was a big blackout blur. And it just kept rolling and rolling and going and going. And eventually, I'm in my adult years, and I have no idea how I got there. And I look in the mirror, and I'm 25, and I'm like, how did this happen? Like, I don't even recognize who I am anymore. And I did all the things that the big book talks about. I switched from scotch to brandy. I did relationship to relationship, man to man. I did everything that I could to fix that hole inside my heart that was so empty. and I've heard someone say this before, but I had a God-sized hole that I was using everything under the sun to fill. And the hole is only something God-sized could fill. It was like a void. And when I heard that, I was probably like a year into sobriety, and I really related with it. But if you would have told me that before I got sober, I would have been like, what kind of drugs are you on? Like, that's ridiculous. I don't need God. I relied on myself and my own self-will, and I would use people to get exactly what I wanted. And it's a very lonely and unfulfilling life. I had I had made lines like, I'll never do this, and I eventually crossed them one by one by one. And at that point, I had done everything that I said that I was never going to do. And the scary thing was it kept going and kept going. It kept pushing it back and back and back, and then finally, I'm drowning. And I don't know how I got there. And I can tell you today, I did the last thing on my list. Like, I had moved from my hometown to Arroyo Grande, and that's where my whole family's from. So I thought maybe I'd feel closer to them in some sort of weird way, and that would really fix that piece in me that needed the approval or love or whatever it was, And life got worse. Life got worse, drastically worse. I was by myself in a strange town, and I had met some of those, people that really had what I needed until it was no longer what I needed. And I lived out there for a couple years, and I worked really hard. I had gotten my CNA, and I was doing elderly care, and I really thought that I had it all together just because I had a good job. I still somewhat had a relationship with my mom, and I had friends. I went out all the time. We got dressed up, and we lived this grandiose life. And I was no longer living in Bakersfield because Bakersfield was the problem. But what I learned there was that Kasey follows Kasey wherever she goes. And like I said before, the drink was never the problem. The drink was the solution. I needed something to quiet this up, and this is my problem. And I ended up finding Alcoholics Anonymous in the same place where my mom met my dad. My mom was a bartender at Harry's, before she lived in Bakersfield. She lived there, and then they moved to Ventura, and they bought their first house, and it was happily ever after. Alcoholic meets alcoholic, and woman meets man in a bar, and the rest is history. I wish I could say that it worked out, but it worked out exactly the way that it was meant to. And for a really long time, I never wanted to be the kid of a divorced family, and now that I know that's truly one of the greatest blessings that I have today is that I have a mixed family. And so my dad and my mom moved to Ventura, and then the oil fields bring my dad and my mom to Bakersfield. And the rest is what I had already shared. And so I found Alcoholics Anonymous in Harry's in Pismo Beach. This lady came up to me and she was like, "Do you always drink like this?" And I said, "Girl, sometimes it's way worse." And she was like, "Well, I have this place, and I think that you might hear something that you need to hear. How about you meet me at this place?" And I was like, "What is it?" And she's like, "Church, come on, let's go." And so I met her the next day. I didn't want to, but she was really the only person that I ever had a real genuine connection with, because sick knows sick, And I finally felt like someone had my best interest at heart. And I knew that if she said that she knew a safe place, that I'd be okay. And I was. But when I got there, I found out that it was Alcoholics Anonymous, and I sat in the back and I didn't talk to anybody. And if you came up to me, I would snarl my nose at you, and I would go sit in the corner and have nothing to do with it, And she ended up taking me to this other really fun thing. It's called YPA. So she took me to a YPA convention. If you don't know what YPA is, it's a big part of my story. I'm a part of Kern County Young People's and Alcoholics Anonymous, and it absolutely saved my life. And before I knew that it was saving my life, because when I had found Alcoholics Anonymous over there, I didn't stay sober. I got to a couple months, and the seed was planted. And life got really dark over there. I was living on my younger cousin's couch. She had she had just had a baby. She had another one on the way, and I was a burden to my younger cousin. That I had only ever put in danger, and she still let me sleep on her couch or like in her spare bedroom. And it got to a point where it was like, it was so bad. Like, I was so empty at this point. I was defeated. I had nowhere to go. I called my mom and I was like, hey, Mom, I know that we haven't really been talking about what's been going on, but it's been really, really, really bad. Can I please come home? And she was like, what are you talking about? Like, I thought you've been like loving your life and everything was good and all these things. And I said, yeah, Facebook is really deceiving. And I pick and choose what I share with you. And so that's exactly what happened. I sucked up my pride and God put it on my heart, even though I didn't know that's what it was then, to call my mom and ask to come home. And, my stepdad had already been sober for some odd years. And so my mom was in this like settled in life, and we had been in this house for all these years. Like, I'm 31 now, and I think that we had bought the house when I was 26. So, not 26, when I was like 6 years old probably. So it'd been all these years established, and I knew that it would be a safe environment. So I came home, and I'm really grateful that YPA had planted something into my brain into my heart, because when I came home, the first meeting that I went to, that's the first thing I found was Young People's and Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had said before I had found AA, I moved home and I was like, if I have 3 really bad nights, I'm going to call it quits. I'm just going to go back to the program. And I had 4 really bad nights, and my last one was on a Friday, and I was like, well, I can't quit on a Friday, so I'll go on Monday. And, I stuck true to that promise for the first time in my life. That was the first promise I actually stuck to. I knew that that's exactly what I needed to do. I knew that, like, you guys were calling me back home. And I was greeted with nothing but love and open arms. And, I heard all the same things that you hear when you come to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Get a sponsor, work the 12 steps, and your life is going to change, And I thought that I could still beat you guys. Like, I thought that I could still do things half measures availed. And I can tell you that, like, I got a sponsor, and she told me I couldn't sponsor for 6 years. So at this point, I had worked the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was just showing up to my commitments, meeting friends, like living the life, right? And I wasn't really doing any of the things that you guys suggested. Like, I wasn't doing, what side are the 12 steps on? This side. I wasn't doing any of those things. Like, I had done them, but it's like I was reading the white and the black and not the black words in the book, She would send me home and she'd be like, read these pages, and I would skim, and now I never leave home without this thing. And here's a picture of me and my mom. It's so cute. It's my book holder. And I would skim and I'd be like, oh yeah, wow, you guys are a mess. This is crazy. Like, this isn't me. And that's what happens when you leave me on my own devices. Like, that's what I'm going to read. Like, you guys are crazy. And I'll do some of those things, but not all of them, And, like, I had gotten to so much pain in sobriety. Sobriety, I guess you could say, because I was working the steps, It was like, and I had sat into a meeting because, I'm a COVID baby. I came in like 6 months before COVID hit. So I did all my meetings on Zoom, and we had to do all these crazy things on, like, in YPA on Zoom, and, like, I'm not tech savvy, I don't really know how. The only thing I know how to really use is Facebook, and that's about it, And so I did all these crazy things on Zoom, and I had this underground meeting, and like I said, my home group is a cigar meeting, and is the cigar meeting in my hometown, and it's Thursday nights at 7 p.m. If you're ever in Bakersfield, we'd love to have you. We have a lot of amazing meetings in Bakersfield, but that meeting in specifically, it really saved my life because, when I it was all men, and it was really the only underground place that I could go. And a couple of my girlfriends and I were invited, and I sat there, and the topic was sponsorship. And the topic was sponsorship, and I had the leader had shared this really amazing share, and it was really inspiring. And when I got called to share, the only thing that I could say was, "Hi, my name is Kasey, and I can't sponsor for 6 years." And those boys were like, "What?" Like, their jaw dropped. They were like, "Absolutely not. We do not do that. The minute we can, we give it back. What was so freely given to us, it's what we do." And I never wanted to go back to that meeting again because I was embarrassed. But it was really the last house on the block because everything else was closed because of COVID. And so what I did the next day was I cried, and then I went back into that meeting, and those boys were like, "We're so sorry for jumping on you like that, but what? We don't do that. Like, that's not what we do here. Like, we give back what was so freely given to us, and if you don't have that, get it." And I said, "Yes, sir. What's your first suggestion?" He said, "Get a new sponsor." And not that one didn't save my life, because she was a vessel, and it was the perfect thing that I needed at that moment. And it had nothing to do with her. It was just that's what she had been given. She couldn't sponsor for 6 years, and she's celebrating like when I turn 4, she'll have like 19 years or something like that. And so it worked for her, but for me, I would have already been dead by now, because what was going to happen was girl meets boy. All the things, everything happened. I almost lost my mom. I met the boy. Life got good. I made friends. Everything was great. Everything was coming, like the promises were coming true in my life. But I did like what was suggested, like, because I still felt so bad on the inside. Like, it was all okay on the outside, and that's how I had always been used to it being. If it looks good on the outside, it must be okay, right? And that's what happened. I got a new sponsor, and what she did was she took my hand and she gave me a safe place to finally lay down what was so deep rooted inside my bones and inside my soul that I could never tell anybody. And she did that for me. She showed me how she got her relationship with God. And when I would ask her questions like, "Well, when you went through something like this, because this is how I learn. This is how I get to see how God works in my life, is through yours." And I would ask her, I'm like, "Well, this is what I'm going through." And she'd be like, "I went through something similar like that too." And I was like, "Well, what did you pray for?" And she told me. And I'm like, "Okay, well, when you prayed for that, what happened?" And it wasn't anything like what I would be looking for. And so I was like, "Thank you for sharing that with me." And what happened in that magic was that I had never been given somewhere really safe. And I had no idea what God could and would do in my life because I had never had a God. When I was really young, my aunt was like, "What's your religion?" And I'd be like, "Well, my mom always said I was Portuguese." Girl, what's your problem? Like, that's how little I thought about God. I had no idea. And the cool thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is my God doesn't have to be your God. It just has to be a God of my own understanding. And what I've found since I started working with that sponsor is I found grace, and I found mercy, and I found love and acceptance and kindness and freedom, because she took me through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous in a way that it was simple. Like, I just had to be honest and open and willing to do so. And pure magic came from that. She ended up not staying sober. I ended up doing a 12-step call at her house, and I was on the other end of that. And I can tell you that feeling of being on the other side of that, there was no judgment, just love and grace and acceptance. And I sat there and I cried with her because I felt how much pain she had just been in, because I have felt that too. And what that taught me was that it doesn't matter if I have 1 year, 37 years, 7 years, and those are all miracles. Like, I'm so happy to be here and celebrate birthdays and milestones and see friends that I haven't seen in a while and be with friends, that had traveled up here with me. But today I have one day at a time. I have one day at a time. And, I've gotten to meet, and, I was going to keep her as my sponsor, but what happened is she was like, so did you find a new sponsor? And I was like, well, I thought you were my sponsor. And she was like, I think you need a new experience. And I was like, okay. So she's one of my best friends today. I got to plan her bridal shower. I got to get an invitation to her wedding. I got to be in the most beautiful parts of her life. And she was in the hardest parts of mine, in the depths of my hell. And I got to be there in the peaks of her valley because of this program, but I got to meet April, and, she took me through some of the hardest things in recent day sobriety that I've ever had to go through, like a separation and abuse, and my part in those things, because that's what the steps show me is my part, that I have more of a part than anyone else that pisses me off. And like, that's the magic of the 12 steps, is I found freedom in reconciliation. I find freedom in clearing my side of the street and my wreckage. I find freedom in the grace and mercy that you guys show me. And this program has absolutely saved my life. I brought my big book because I never leave home without it. And I thought that I was going to, say some really like spiritual things that only the big book can tell me, because anytime I need to be equipped with the facts about myself, I open this book, because it tells me exactly the nature of my disease. It tells me what I do in the morning. It tells me how I go to sleep at night. It tells me what happens when self-will runs riot, and when I'm acting like the director and the actor and the stage director, and I'm doing the lights, which it's beautiful lighting in here, and everything is really nicely put together. So thank you for all of you guys do. And I love meetings where we read the traditions, because a lot of the meetings at home we pick one or the other, and the steps are for me, and the traditions are for the group. Because when I get here, I don't know how to be amongst you guys. I don't know how to act in a group setting. I don't know even how to be a human being, and you guys teach me how to do that. I've gotten to grow up in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, because when I got here, I was not an adult. I was a child. And I don't really necessarily know if I'm an adult now. I just started making my own doctor's appointments and stuff, which is pretty cool. I have healthcare, guys, and new tires, and car insurance. And I didn't even have to ask my dad. But those are the things that you guys promise me, is that I will intuitively know how to handle situations that I could never do before, ever. I needed my mom to make my health appointments when I even lived at the coast. And I'd be like, Mom, I'm not feeling good. Can you call the doctor for me? Because I'm scared and I have anxiety. And today, I don't have anxiety. I live with peace and freedom and joy. And even when and I'm almost done. But I'm gonna tell you guys a little bit more about what this program has given me. I like Amy said, I'm her sponsor, and I've gotten to work with so many women in the program. Like, every time I get asked to be a sponsor, it is not only my privilege and my utmost honor to do that, but I get to go through the big book again and again and again. And the real magic takes place when you sit across from another alcoholic and you watch that light turn on in their eyes. And you let them know that not only have you done that, but I've done one better. Or even if you haven't done it, you still have the understanding and the love to know that this is a safe place, and there's nothing that you can say in Alcoholics Anonymous that someone in this room hasn't already gone through. So if you're struggling, please reach out. And if you need help, and I don't know what you're going through, I'll find you someone that has a similar story that can help you through exactly what you're going through right now. And if you don't have a big book, please come and see me after the meeting, and I would be glad to buy you one. But get a sponsor and work the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Not only can it save your life, but the relationships that I have today, I mean, man, I couldn't trade that. I couldn't explain that to you if I tried. If you told me to write down what your relationships look like today, I have no idea. Because they're only God-given, and I've been absolutely saved by this program. It is an honor ever to experience birthdays and milestones and share any sort of experience, strength, and hope with anybody who's willing to listen. And it's one of the bright spots in my life is to be able to give back what was so freely given to me, even at a group level. I would travel to the ends of the earth to give back to this program. I don't have enough money to pay back to this program, but I do have enough experience out there to know that I never want to go back. And if you guys keep me sober, this is exactly where I hope to stay for the rest of my life, in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I've gotten to get married in the rooms. I've gotten to be separated. I've gotten to learn how to be a good ex. I mean, that's weird. I've gotten to learn how to be a good wife and a good friend and a good daughter. When I almost lost my mom, usually everything's about me. Me. What can I get from whatever, you guys, And what I did was I suited up and I showed up for her. I was the one that called the ambulance for her to be there. And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me. It's given me a life beyond my wildest dreams. It's given me the ability to have one hand planted in your guys' hands and one hand planted in God's. And in that, I can do anything. As long as I have one and I'm just walking with my head held high, I can get through anything. And I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but I know what today looks like, and I get to be of maximum service today. To my sponsees, to any alcoholic who needs help, to my family in and outside of the rooms, and I'm super grateful to be here. Thank you again for asking me to speak.